to you this year. And to all of us, really, because this topic in particular is one that makes or breaks the school year. And it is one that we always have some of our greatest challenges with. But first of all, we are here at Ouachita Hills really because we have a Magna Carta. Do you know what the Magna Carta was? Anybody know, has anybody seen the Magna Carta? I've seen it. I've seen the Magna Carta. It's actually still available if you go to the British Museum or in London there. And they have the original Magna Carta still from 12, whatever it was, 15, whatever, what was the date? 1215. I was getting 15 and 12. 1215. I mean, that's an old document, right? Almost, very old. Can you cut them in half? That's not me. It was this one. It was that. I know, but you need to put new paper in it. It probably ran out of paper. And then cut them in half. It ran out of ink too? If you could make copies, I could send more to print, but that's all I can do. If you could make, I'll need it not right now anyway, so you have a little bit of time. So we have a Magna Carta, which means that is the charter. It's the charter that is what made England great. It's like we have a constitution. What is our Magna Carta as a school? It is the Bible. It is. Now, that is amplified through what? Or at least gives us specific instructions through what? Through the spirit of prophecy. So we have one goal really in our purpose here, and that is to follow the counsel as best we can. We're not perfect in it. We're not doing, we're always trying to improve and get better at it. And any staff that has been here will admit that we haven't arrived yet, but we're trying, right? And our goal is to follow the counsel that we have as close as we have. And so we study the counsel, and so in these meetings, you're going to often get a lot of the counsel that we have from the spirit of prophecy, and today I want to do that. So we're going to share, we're going to look a lot at what it says so that we can understand why it is, what it is, the counsel, and why it is that God has given us this, because it's so important. Otherwise, if we don't, what's going to happen? If we don't follow the counsel, what's going to happen to our school? We're going to become just like any other school around you. Why come here? Why pay that much money to come to this place in Arkansas and live where you don't have the phones and you don't have sports and you don't have. Why could do that when you could go there and get it all? Unless you're coming for a different reason than the reason why the schools exist. Does that make sense? And I hope that's why. And so the only reason we exist is to follow that counsel and try, because we believe that if we follow it, it's going to make us successful. It's going to make you successful in your spiritual life. And get this, it is going to make you, it begins with an H and ends with a Y. It's going to make you happy. And sometimes we have this attitude, if I follow all that, I'm going to be miserable. If I do that, I'm not going to have any fun in life. Does God want you to have fun? He says, at my right hand are what forevermore? In the Bible. Bible quote. At my right hand are pleasures forevermore. It's not necessarily like, giddy laugh. We tend to have that a lot this year, it sounds like, this giddy laugh. But that's not wrong. But he wants to give you joy and pleasure abundantly. And there's an enemy out there that wants to destroy you, and he's going to try to rip away from you. You're going to think you're going to get joy, and in the end, it's going to be sorrow and misery. And none of us want that, but we're all trying to get it. We're all trying to get joy, and in the process, we lose it if we don't follow God's plan. So the whole purpose we're here is to follow God's plan and to understand what that plan is, and then to see that, I hope, anyway, that you see that plan is actually a good reason. There are scientific reasons for it. John, I thought I had my clicker, and I don't. I don't know if you have one or if there's one up here I could use. I don't have my clicker. It would be helpful if I could have one. If not, I can make do. But if there was one, I always have it in here, but I took it out when we went on our trip, and I don't have it. Okay, so I want to tell you a story. First, maybe some of you are familiar. This guy. Anybody know who this guy was? So He, believe it or not, he's 22. It's like he's 38. That's very specific. I think he's 39. He actually is only 22. That guy is 22. And it might be because if you were to join the Civil War, you'd have to grow up quick too, wouldn't you? Hard times make hard men, right? Yeah, you can see it in their face. If you've been through some hard times, you grow up pretty quick. His name is William. He was if I can get these details correctly, he was from Vermont. And he was, this is right at the beginning of the Civil War. Granton Village in Vermont was this, it's on now Route 302, but he was one of 7 sons and 1 daughters of a farmer by the names of Thomas and Mary Scott by name. And the first battle of Bull Run took place on July 21 of 1861. But before that, the shelling of Fort Sumter was in April of that year, 1861. You all know that date, don't you, American history students? The beginning of the Civil War. April of 1861 was the shelling of Fort Sumter. And things were not going very well for the United States, the Union Army, right? And so Abraham Lincoln issued a call to come to arms, a second one, and a third one. And just out of a sense of duty, William here in this case, he volunteered. He volunteered just like weeks. He volunteered on July 10. The Battle of Bull Run, the first disastrous battle for the United States Union Army, happens on July 21. So 9 days before Battle of Bull Run, he volunteers for the Army. And he and his son, and he's enlisted. Now, it takes a while for the regiment in Vermont to get organized, and he misses the first battle. He does not go to the Battle of Bull Run. But do you know what happened at the Battle of Bull Run? It was bad for Union Army, right? And Ellen White saw it in vision with an angel waving his hand or whatever over the battle, and the confusion entering the northern ranks, and then they all retreated without warning, and then the Southern Army didn't follow up, and it was a judgment on both sides. You've read that story. Remember from that? This is the Battle of Bull Run. But his regiment didn't get there in time to engage in it. But now, after the Battle of Bull Run, the Southern Army is on the doorstep of Washington, D.C., like 10 miles. Now, today, 10 miles is from just, it's 5 miles from here to Amity, right? And if our enemy, the Germans, were on the other side of Amity today, this would be ridiculous, right? But 10 miles back then, you had to go slow, right? And so, if we were in World War II, I wasn't just saying Germans, right? But if we were in World War II, you understand. So, 10 miles. The Southern Army was just 10 miles out of Washington, D.C. Abraham Lincoln expected almost to look out his window and seeing the Southern armies marching down the Washington, D.C. They were so close. And so William and his infantry get down there, and his unit was assigned to guard the entrance to Washington, D.C. It was a bridge, and it was called the what was the name of it? No, the bridge. It was the chain bridge. It was the main bridge going across the Potomac into the national capital. And it was a strategic location because if it fell, they had a straight shot straight into the heart of Washington, D.C., our nation's capital. And if the capital fell, what would the morale be like for the North? Boy, it'd be bad. And so Scott and his brigade was assigned to guard this. And on the night of August 30, William Scott faithfully performed his guard duty. Now, if you were a guard on guard duty, and you knew the enemy was just down that road, and if they made it past you, who gets the blame? Right? Do you think he stayed awake? He did. All night long. He stayed awake, faithfully performed his guard duty. Next day, he goes about his duties. The next evening, August 31, his comrade, another fellow, was assigned to guard duty, but he was sick. And so William volunteered, I'll take his place. 2 nights in a row. He faithfully performs his guard duty until sometime between the hours of 3 and 4 in the morning. He's almost been up for 48 hours straight without sleep. And somewhere in those hours, his guard, that's in captain of the guard, makes his round to check on the guard duty and finds William asleep. First case in the Northern Army. Asleep on guard duty with the enemy 10 miles that way and the whole capital of Washington, D.C. behind. If they had come right then, it could have been his fault and his fault alone that the Civil War ended with the South victorious pretty quick. And there is a universal law that says if you are asleep on guard duty, the penalty is death. It was like the Romans. It's almost a universal law in all militaries. Because why? Why is it so severe? Because on your shoulders rests the safety of everybody, right? And if the penalty is high, hopefully you'll take the responsibility seriously, right? And so, William, the generals, some of them anyway, were like, we've got to demonstrate that this is important, that you can't do this. His death warrant was signed. Death by the firing squad. Now that could be a little morale lowering because, everybody recognizes he's not what? He's not real. Yes, he's guilty, but everybody understood he wasn't really responding. He was doing this as an honor. He was doing this to help somebody else, and now he's getting punished for helping somebody else, but he was asleep, and the law says, asleep, death. And William was condemned to be shot, and it was set for September 4 of 1861. Falling asleep on guard duty is serious business, young people. It is a universal law, and you and I are in a battle. What is it called? The Great Controversy. And if you didn't know it yet, wake up, because you're in the middle between 2 crosshairs. They're both after you. Is it true? They're both after you. One loves you and wants happiness. The other wants to destroy you, thinking that you'll get happiness. And in the end, he'll chew you out, spit you out, and curse God in his face and blame God for it. Right? But you and I are in the battle. And it is serious business that we are in. Failure to do our duty in battle is serious business. Now, I want to talk to the teachers this morning. I'm one of them. And I want you all to listen. Because we are told this. These are some of the counsel that we are told to teachers. It says, for this, something, God would hold the teachers responsible. She says, first, the sin, she was speaking of the students, would be charged against the guardian of the schools as if they had committed it themselves. She goes on to say, this is a whole article that she gave to the school. It says, the Lord makes the principals and teachers responsible for their students. Those are statements directly from the Spirit of prophecy. Teachers are responsible. They are on what? Guard duty. They are. We are. Now listen. She says this, goes on, the whole school, principal teachers are regarded as guilty before God of your misdemeanors which are apparent. Again and again, she said, I stood before the students of Avondale School with a message from the Lord. She said she did this again and again. Now, by the way, I've been to Avondale. I've been to Sunnyside there both places with Ellen White. My grandfather was actually worked for Ellen White in Australia. And some of you, anyway, my grandmother, she was born in 1901, and Mrs. White left Australia in 1901. Before she was 1 year old, Mrs. White held my grandmother. Mrs. White came back to the United States, and my grandmother was 15 when Mrs. White died. Almost 15. She didn't know her personally, but she read the articles in the Review, living from a living prophet at the time. My grandmother did. Now, my great-grandfather, my grandmother's father, worked for Mrs. White as a handyman. A long story, I won't tell you. But I've been there, and she, for almost 10 years, was next door to Avondale. And I don't know what it would be like, but can you imagine sitting here? Okay, and then Mrs. White would like to speak to the students this morning. And then she walks up here, and she stands at the podium and says, I'm so glad to see so many of you here this morning. And that's how she usually began her talks. And she would talk to them. Sometimes, one incident, she talked to the students, she went home, and she slept, and they had a whole activity day they did. It was a game day. The very next morning, another long story, the very next morning, she wasn't going to come back, but she woke up early, she saddled herself, she got the carriage, and she went and she knocked on the president's door before he was awake. And she said, get the students together, I have a message from the Lord for them. And they all came in the chapel, and she stood up there and described what had happened the day before she didn't know what had gone on, but she described what had happened before and gave them counsel, and that was solemn. They rejected it at first. Eventually, they accepted it. And at the end of the school year, the first 3 years of Avondale's existence, Ellen White says that to a student, save one or two exceptions, every student in the school was converted. They were a school it was an academy college experience. Like they had high school and the age and college age students. And she says every student was converted, save one or two exceptions, she said. And it was a group of about 60 students. I was like, whoa. A prophet saying every student is converted? They must have been, I think. Right? And what was how did they do it? And she had the counsel over and over again. She said, I stood before the students. What was this counsel that she's going to hold the teachers responsible for? Now notice, young people, I want you to see what it is because it's very clear. What is it responsible for? This is the context. She said, I told the principals and teachers that God had laid upon them the responsibility of watching for souls as they must give an account. I showed them that the wrong course pursued by some of the students would mislead others if it were continued, and for this, God would hold the teachers responsible. So what is he saying? What's she saying? There's one bad apple, and if we allow that to happen, they're going to lead others, it's going to spoil a bunch, and who's responsible? The one who fell asleep on guard duty, and the penalty was death. Do you want to be a teacher? God holds the teachers more accountable than he does the students. Because we're responsible. You understand? The guard duty is the responsible person. The guy who fell asleep in the barracks doesn't get penalized. It's the teacher. You understand? You understand that we have this fearful responsibility? That if we're going to take our job seriously, we've got to go. Do you understand? Okay, so what is the counsel? What do you think it is? What is this whole misdemeanor thing? This is what it is. Some students would attend school who would not have been disciplined at home and whose ideas of proper education and its value were perverted. In other words, they had this idea, this is what true education is about, this is what I want to do, and they don't know what true education is all about. And it says, if these were allowed to carry things in their own way, the object for which the school was established would be defeated, and the sin would be charged against the guardians of the schools as if they had committed. She says it over again in this letter, and this is counsels to parents, teachers, and students. And I'm like, when I read this, it gives me like, chills down my back because I'm like, ouch, over and over again. She says, God's going to look at you, and he's going to, I didn't do it, Lord. But he says, I treat you as if you did because it happened under your watch. You understand? All right, so here it is. She goes on. Again and again, I stood before the students of the school with a message from the Lord regarding here it is. You know what it is? Say something that leads to it. She says this. Again and again I stood regarding the deleterious influence of free and easy association between young men and young women. And God is going to hold me responsible, she says, if I allow this free and easy association between young men and young women. It doesn't sound that bad, does it? I mean, hey, wait a second. That's what they do in the world. Everybody just, we've had students that come to Ouachita Hills. Well, I won't go there yet. All right. She said, I told them that if they did not keep themselves to themselves and endeavor to make the most of their time, school would not benefit them, and those paying their expenses would be disappointed. Who is paying your expenses? Your parents are. And they sent you here because they want you to, have good Christian friends and a good Christian environment and find a spouse so that they can get married. Is that right? I have had a parent I know of, at least one, that said, I'm sending you to Ouachita Hills and I want you to find a spouse. We have had a parent that told them that. You're surrounded by other godly young people. They're afraid that they'll get out there and they'll find an ungodly one, so you better find one now. And I can almost sympathize with that. This is a wonderful school with a lot of godly young people. By God's grace, I hope. You're becoming that, right? But I guarantee if you find one now, it won't be the right one, likely. Because I'll tell you why in a minute. But this is the context of what God is going to hold the accountable teachers for. Did I say that right? The teacher is accountable for, right? All right, so listen, it goes on, as if it was enough, but she goes on with more. She said, I told them, this is the students, again and again she said, I told them that if they were determined to have their own will and their own way, it would be better for them to return to their homes, to the guardianship of their parents. Listen, if you're going to do your own thing, you're going to form attachments and find them here, go home. Don't stay here. This is not the place. And then she goes on. This they could do at any time if they decided not to stand under the yoke of obedience. Say, listen, at any time. And by the way, you're not forced, to come here. All of you had this interview, and all of you were asked, do you want to follow? Do you understand the rules? Do you want to follow them? And every one of you said, yes, I'm willing. If you said, no, we're not willing, we'd say, that's fine. You don't have to come here. There's other schools, right? But the question is, will you do it? And you don't have to stay here if you decide that you don't want to be. We want you to be here. I'm not saying leave, but if you decide you don't want to be here, you don't have to, right? For we did not design to have a few leading spirits in wrongdoing, demoralizing the other students. And it goes on. If the teachers have not a decided command, so this is another section, but it's very similar. It is time that they did, for the respectability and credit of the school may be maintained. The Lord makes the principals and teachers responsible for their students. Oh, young people, who's responsible for what happens here at the school? The teachers are. But it's the students who determine the experience of the school. That's what we're told. But teachers have this hard job because we have this responsibility, and God is going to hold us accountable. He's going to hold us accountable. Now, we are held accountable to guard the free and easy association, and if we fail to do so, he's going to do this. Now, why is this the case? Here are some things about parenting. As a parent, I have 2 children. Praise God. Best experience I had having kids. But first, the best experience was getting married to the right person, the right time, the right place, and the right mission. I met my wife here at the school. I was single when I came. She was still single. And we were both focused on ministry. And when we had our same calling and our same, we knew we were headed in this direction. And she was headed in that direction. Hey, we're headed in the same direction, And then the Lord led us together. Then we had Elliot, and then 2.5 years later we had Ella. And I'll tell you, when you sit in that office there and parents come by and they say, I'm giving you my child, their only child, and tears start coming down a grown man's cheek because they're going to go home to an empty home and they just left their child at a school, it does something. I'm sitting there going, weak knees. Because I'm like, they are giving a responsibility to us. And if we fail, parents will do anything for their child. Yes or no? They would rather die than see their child suffer. The greatest difficulty, you can say, you can do anything you want to me, but if you do something to my child, that's more painful. Any parent will tell you that. And that's why these ransoms, they kidnap the child because they know the parent will do anything to get their child back, just about. And so it's a fearsome responsibility. Why do they do that? Why do parents come in and give them to? Because, well, they want the best for you. And they think they found the best school, as far as they know, that's trying to follow the counsel. At least they think that, otherwise they find another one, I'm assuming, right? And so we have this fearful responsibility. Now listen to this counsel that we have. Specific counsel that we have for schools, that's a sanitarium, our colleges. Now this is a college, it's a little older, but it also, most of these colleges at the time had high school age students. And it says our office is a publication and every mission. What does that include? That's about everything, right? Our sanitariums, that's our medical. Our colleges, that's our educational. Offices of publication, that's the Review and Herald, and that's the publication. And every mission, that's everything else. The strictest rules must be enforced. Nothing can so effectually demoralize these institutions and our missions as want of prudence and watchful reserve in the association of young men and young women. Is that a strong statement? Nothing can more effectually, what does it mean to demoralize? To get rid of morals, which is called to be immoral. And if somebody says to you, oh, that's an immoral person, would you want that reputation? What will cause our institutions to be known as immoral places? A lack of watchful reserve in the associations of young men and young women. And who is God going to hold responsible for it? Us. Now, you all are the ones who do it, but he's going to hold us responsible if it happens. If it happens, right? Now, it can happen in staff too, honestly. Staff can have unwise associations, and we're accountable for ourselves in addition. It says, there is an animal. Listen to this. There's an animal that strikes the arm with feebleness the moment it touches it. What is it called? It's usually a snake, venomous snake, right? It strikes the arm. The muscles become as if paralyzed. In a similar way, it will be with you spiritually if your thoughts are allowed to run in a certain channel and you give attention and preferences to young girls. He was speaking to a man. All this familiarity is what? Death to spirituality. Now, young people, this free associations, and she says, she's speaking of flirtation. In fact, I think, do I have the next one on here? Does it go on? No, it's a different one. She's talking about flirtation going on between male, and in this case, she was speaking to a male. And she says, listen, all this stuff is death. I've had students that have told us, I formed this relationship, and my spirituality grew. My walk with God just like, and they were into this, romantic relationship. What do you think about that? My only thought is, and by the way, I know this person, and they eventually got married. Well, it was after they'd finished here, but the student was a student here, and while he was a student here, we had the same rules, and he wrote up a big, long, defense of dating in school. Reasoning of why we should allow dating in school. But he wasn't even a student here. He had gone on to another self-supporting ministry that also had the same principles. And it was another student in that ministry that he started becoming romantically friends with. And he wrote up this big defense. He eventually got married to her. And they were married for about 10 or 15 years, a long time. Had no children, thankfully, because what do you think happened? Yeah, they're divorced today. They're divorced. And I can't say that, you can't put a pin and say it was all because of this, or because they started early, they defended. I don't know. There's lots of reasons why people, marriages aren't successful. But I have a sorrow in my heart, I understand, because I wonder if he had done it differently, if he might have had a different outcome. I don't know. And that doesn't mean if a divorce happens, it's the worst thing, right? Things happen. I'm not saying that. You understand. But I know this for certain, that if you follow the counsel, you have the best chance of having the happiest and most successful life. That's what I firmly believe. You understand? It doesn't mean that if you follow the counsel, you won't have problems, but it's the best chance because God is interested in your happiness. I read that one. Okay, Satan is busily engaged. Listen to this, especially to young men. This counsel was written. Satan is busily engaged in influencing those who are wholly unsuited for each other to unite their interests. He exalts in this work, for by it he can produce more misery and hopeless woe on the human family than by exercising his skill in any other direction. Are these blanket statements that are huge and that are like, whoa? In other words, the devil can cause more misery right here in this by exercise than anything else he can do. And what is the skill that he's using? Is getting those to be united with each other that are not suited for each other. And you know who that is specifically? People that are unequally yoked. Believer with unbeliever especially, but it's also unequally yoked with like a person who has one standing of the spirit of prophecy and somebody else that has another standing of the spirit of prophecy. You understand? That you might not follow the same reasoning in the home that makes it a happy home. And it says, young men, this I told you, have received the truth, run well for a season, but Satan has woven his meshes about them in unwise attachments and poor marriages. This he saw would be the most successful way of he could allure them from the path of holiness. So the devil knows if you're intending, young men, to follow Jesus and to become a worker for him, he knows the most successful thing he can do to deter you from that is to get you attached to somebody early on, prematurely, not the right time, the right place, or the right person necessarily, because if it's not the right time or the right place, it's not the right person at that point. Understand? Because it will be the most effective thing he can to disturb you and distract you from your calling in life. And once it's formed, you're stuck. Once you've married, you can't change it. You all follow? He has a plan for you. Now, that goes for the ladies, too. I mean, you get the wrong one, and God's going to deter you, but it was specifically given. I mean, not God's going to deter you. It's going to deter you from it, but the counsel is also applicable to ladies. Okay, why is this so important? Do you remember what the Bible says in Timothy 2, verse 19 and 22? It says, and let every one of you that nameth the name of Christ depart from iniquity. 22, flee youthful lusts, but follow righteousness, faith, charity, peace, and with them that call on the Lord out of a pure heart. What does it say to flee? Youthful lust. And what does it mean to flee? Am I fleeing right now? Why not? Because you would know that if I was fleeing, you would all look quickly because you're about ready to run too. If I'm suddenly go, and I start running like that, you're all going to go, and you're ready to go. I mean, you're ready to flee too. When you see somebody fleeing, you're ready to sprint because there's danger, right? You know it. And you all be like, what's going on? What was it, right? I mean, fleeing is like, you're out of there because there's danger behind you. What does that mean about youthful lust? If we are told we have to flee it. What does it say about the lust? There's danger there. Do you understand? And in particular, young people, this is the way it works. I'm going to tell you a little bit. What's not in here, but this is the way it works with our brain development, our hormonal cycles, and what is happening in your life right now. Something happens when you hit 12, 13, the teenage years. Adolescent was a word that's been recently coined, but it's been around. Even Socrates talks about it. Everybody, throughout history, everybody talks about this time period called adolescence. It's only been recently named, but from the 13 to the 18 years of age, this era. And everybody says it's so fraught with emotional upheaval. And there's a reason that more studies they've done on it recently. And what it is, real quickly, is that the brain in an adolescent is developing. The frontal lobe, do you know what that is? What is the frontal lobe responsible for? Your thoughts, reason, conscience, judgment, discernment. Those are all right up here, right? Right in between your ears. There's a place called the amygdala, and it's the limbic system. And that is the flight, fight, or freeze. There's these 3 F's, right? It's the gut response. When a lion jumps out of the woods, you don't go, I think that animal has sharp teeth. It makes a loud noise. Maybe I should run. Let me think. Should I run or not? What do? You don't think. When the amygdala fires, it overpowers the frontal lobe entirely, and you either fight, flight, or freeze. And by the way, it's about 20, 60, 40. 20, 60, 40. About 20% flee, 20% fight, and about 60% freeze. That's statistically. When an emergency happens, a lot of people will go, oh, lion. And they don't run, and they don't fight. They just freeze. And then the lion goes, oh, well, thank you, right? 20% take off, and 20% go, ha, right? And they're ready to fight the thing. That's statistics. They've actually had it. They figured it out, right? And they've done studies. When they had these national, like 9/11, when that happened, that's exactly what happened. 60% of the people just froze, and they could have all gotten out of the building. Instead, they just froze and didn't do anything. And only 20% got out. Because anytime there's a national, that's about the average. So you have this fight. And by the way, young people, listen. When you are a teenager, this system in between your ears called the limbic system is on like full-blown force. It is fully developed and fully operational, which means your emotions, that's the fear, that's the excitement, that's the happiness, that's all the limbic system, is fully functioning. You're like, whenever something happens, it's online. The frontal lobe is not yet fully functioning. It does not finish growing until the age of around 30 for gentlemen and about 26 for ladies on average. In other words, is there a reason why God says you should not be a priest could not be a priest until the age of 30? Why Jesus didn't begin his ministry until the age of 30? There's a good reason. And neither, I don't think, should you get married before the age of 30. Hyperbole, okay. But I'll tell you this, the statistics show, in other words, the studies they have shown, that the later you get married in life until around the age of 28, the happier your marriage will be. That's just studies they've shown. That when they looked, you got married here, how happy was your marriage? And they just recorded thousands of marriages. They found that 28 was the magical number. At 28, it plateaus until about 35. And those are the happiest marriages, and after 35, it starts going back down again. They're unhappier again. Why do you think that is? Because the older you get, the more entrenched you become in like my ways, and this is the way life has to be. And when you get married with somebody else that says my ways and this is the way life has to be, you can understand you might have problems there, right? And there's no kids yet in the home to balance that out, and they might be too old to have them sometimes. So, at any rate, the happiest ages are literally between the ages of 28 and 35. And I think there's a good reason, because a lot of people change. I'm getting ahead of myself. But listen, the Bible says to do what? To flee youthful lusts. And what is firing is right here. You see someone, you're like, oh, and it gives you a dopamine hit. It's a reward. And that's the limbic system firing. And it fires. And you're like, oh, she looked at me. Boom! And you get this hit. Oh, he's so funny. He listens to me. And we get this dopamine hit. And it's fully functioning, but the frontal lobe is not yet online that says, you need to be cautious, because there's an enemy out there that's going to try to get you attached now to the wrong person and destroy your life. And he's going to spit you up and chew you out and then laugh at you when you're in pain and misery. Only God loves you, and he's the only one that's going to be happy if you follow his counsel. And he's going to be sad if you don't, because you know it brings you misery and sorrow. All right, so going on, let's see. What about 2 Peter? Do you remember 1 Peter, rather? He said, you are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a peculiar people, that ye should do what? Show forth the praises of him who has called you out of darkness into this marvelous light. Dearly beloved, I beseech you, as strangers and pilgrims, abstain from fleshly lusts that do what? War. We are in a war. And you have these lusts. And what do? They war against your soul. Did you read that about death to spirituality? Did we read that? About no more effective ways of destroying your spiritual life than by getting you unwise attachation? Does the Bible say that these lusts, these lusts that we have, war against the soul? They do, young people. These passions, these desires, and you have this heightened. So this is what happens. You eat sugar. You go to the cafeteria. Let's not say the cafeteria because you don't get sugar too often in the caf. But let's say you go home and mom serves you a donut. No, mom doesn't serve you. Mom wouldn't serve you a donut. You go steal a donut. Okay. You go to the store and buy one. How about that? Okay, you go to the store and buy your donut, right? And you bite into it, and it's this creamy, delicious, what do you call it? The ones that are stuffed with that cream on the inside. Yeah, jelly donut, but I'm thinking of the white custard ones anyway. I haven't had one in years, but I admit I had one, okay? I've had one, okay? So you bite into that thing. What does it do in your brain? It fires your dopamine receptors. And dopamine is the only chemical in the brain of addiction. That's what the scientists said. Dopamine is the chemical in the brain of addiction. And we often become addicted to caffeine. They all fire the dopamine receptors, right? Anything that is addictive fires the dopamine receptors. Now, so when you would eat that, if I eat that as a 18 or even as a 12-year-old, you get a spike like this. It goes, and you're like, wow, that was good. I should do that again. It gives you a spike in the dopamine. Everybody gets it. It's universal in mankind. But it's about the same before the age of puberty, and it's about the same after the age of puberty. But do you know what happens during the age of puberty? Your brain, that limbic system, is heightened to sensitivity on the reward circuit. And scientists say that you get 2 to 4 times the kick. So an adult eats it and they go, wow, that was good. A teenager eats it and they go, wow, that was good. It's just science. Now, any parent could tell you that. What happens when teenagers become teenagers? What happens to the eating habits of young men when they become teenagers? Especially in the area of those Twinkies and the things, we take I take all the students out on mission trips, and we go to a fellowship meal. And over here is a nice dessert table. Where do you think I find my students most often? I see some of you going, you've been there, you've done that. That is far more enticing than the vegetables and the broccoli and the haystacks. That's what they almost always universally give us, you understand? But over here is this one that gives that spike, and it is literally 2 to 4 times the kick that you would have gotten if you would have later on. And this is that they did a research. Mice go through puberty at 12 weeks. They go through puberty at 12 weeks. They grow rapidly. I think it's 12. It might have been 7 weeks. I think it might have been 7. I might be remembering wrong. But, they grow rapidly, and so they're babies, and then at around 7 weeks, they go through a period of puberty. Do you know what they do when they go into puberty, mice? They start leaving their nuclear family, and they start hanging out with other adolescent mice. I'm serious. They do. And they start doing risky behaviors, like they're exploring, and they're crawling over, and they're looking underneath, and they're walking everything. And mice are doing everything that teenagers do. It's fascinating. And so scientists are like, hey, these people, we can study these things, deciding to find out about their brain and puberty. And so what they did is they took them, and they gave them a drop of sweetened condensed milk. Now, sweetened condensed milk has protein, and it has the sugar, and so mice are looking, they're growing so fast, they're craving protein and sugar. And it gives them this boo, kick, so they did 2 experiments. They had one with a sweetened condensed pan. They just said, here's milk. Eat as much as you want. And the mice, before they were into puberty, they would eat a certain amount of milk relative to their body weight. And after puberty, they would eat a certain amount of milk relative to their body weight. But what do you think happened during puberty? I mean, they would eat like twice as much relative to their body weight during this time period of puberty. But they did an even more interesting experiment. They had a machine that said, okay, you push a button and you get a drop of sweetened condensed milk. And then the next time you have to push the button twice to get one drop. The next time you have to push it 3 times to get one drop. Next time, so they trained the mice to push the button, and the question was, how much effort would a mouse go through to get one drop of sweetened condensed milk? It was a judgment, an illustration of how addicted they were to it, you understand? And so the mice, before puberty, they would all push it a certain amount of times, and they would get a drink. And then they would give up. It's too much work. It's not worth it. After puberty, it was about the same. What do you think happened during puberty? Boy, yeah, they almost didn't stop. I'm just saying, young people, there is a period. Listen carefully. There is a period that you're going through right now where you're going to have this heightened response of your dopamine receptors of the limbic system that fire when it comes to relationships. That'll be almost more than any other period in your life. And then they found out that when you have that sweetened condensed drop and another teenager is there, it puts it on steroids. In other words, if something is good, that donut is good, and you get a spike for it, and you had another teenager with you when you ate it, it's even better. Because association itself with other teenagers is a spike, you understand? And when you're doing a pleasurable experience, when you're being spiked, you get a bigger one. And so, do you know what a risk does? So why do teenagers make risky choices and do risky behaviors? Studies show that teenagers can tell you all of the risks involved, exactly how dangerous it is and what the result would be if they did it. In other words, if you sat them down and said, okay, what are the dangers of traveling down the road at 100 miles an hour and going around a curve on a gravel road? Drifting, yeah. They would tell you exactly as much as any adult what the dangers are, what they should do, and reason through it. Their frontal lobe, when you sit them by themselves, is firing at full function. But why is it that teenagers are known? And by the way, studies show that when you hit your teenager years, your chance of dying by accidents doubles. Now, it was already low, so it went from like 0.3 to 0.6 or something like that. It still is not high, but it doubled when you went into that. Why is it? Because, this is the deal, is that when you do something in a group and you take a risk, the risk gives you a dopamine, the group disc gives you a dopamine, and so the reason why scientists say the reason why teenagers take greater risks is because they get a greater reward out of the risk. Do you follow that? In other words, that dopamine fires, adults look at it and say, yeah, that would be a dopamine hit, but it's not worth the risk, right? The risk outweighs the dopamine reward. The teenager gets a huge dopamine, so the risk is small. I better risk it. You understand? And they do risky behaviors because they get a greater reward. They think it all has to do with the reward system. So listen, young people, doing a risky thing at OHA, what could it be that we're talking about this morning? I have a friendship that nobody knows about. And if I form this up, I could get really in trouble, and that's a huge risk. And what does that risk give you? A dopamine hit, because you're taking a risk and you're doing it in the context of friends. And when friends support you, now you have everybody taking a risk. We could all get into trouble, but nobody knows about it. We're getting a risk. And we're doing it in friends. You understand? But young people, what does the Bible say is after you? What does it say? It does what? It wars against your soul. And who is God going to hold responsible when you do that? You understand? Are we talking about serious things here? We are. The devil's after you. He's going to destroy you. And then God's going to blame me. Who's going to get in trouble? All of us. All right. Going on. Oh. What do you see in that picture? She's not in puberty. No, but I have an important lesson from this person who is not in puberty. She passed puberty a long time ago. But when did she start that, probably? I almost guarantee most people who start smoking do so in the teenage years. The devil knows that if he gets you in the teenage years, he will have you the entire life. If he can get you to wear a certain clothes, to drink a certain thing, to eat a certain food, you'll eat that food the rest of your life. And I'll tell you, young people, what type of style do your parents wear? Old people clothes. They wear the style of the teenage friends when they were teenagers. Because that was their network of friends. And all that generation keeps doing the same thing. Because whatever you do as a teenager, you'll do the rest of your life. I remember when I was they had boat shoes. You all don't even know what boat shoes are. Some of you know what boat shoes are. And when I was in college, everybody had to have boat shoes. You know what I had? I had boat shoes. And afterwards, I remember when I came to Ouachita Hills, you know what I had? I had boat shoes. And my students are like, no, these are not boat shoes. These are the only shoes I can wear. People laugh at my shoes, but I'm like, if you have size 16 foot and it's narrow, I have two shoes I can wear. Literally, I have two shoes. It makes shopping shoes, I never shop for shoes. I never shop for any clothes, by the way, because you can't find them. So anyway, my students are like, boat shoes, you wear boat shoes? You're old people clothes. But why did I wear them? Because you know who also had boat shoes when they came to Ouachita Hills? Pastor Powell. We were roommates in college. And those were the in things. I'm just telling you, young people. You might think they're old, but what the teenagers are going to say when you have kids someday? They're going to say, yeah, look at mom, she's wearing boat shoes. She's wearing old people's clothes. Why? Because you're going to be wearing what everybody around you wears, and she's still wearing what she was wearing when she was in high school. It happens that way. Now listen, she probably got started as a teenager, and she smoked for 100 years, and she hasn't died of lung cancer. Have you ever heard of those stories? Have you ever heard of those stories? The person that she probably is not 100. If she smokes, she's probably 60 and you don't know it. It ages you. I'm telling you it does. But suppose she is 100 and somebody says, I can smoke because I know my grandmother and she smoked to be 100 and it doesn't hurt. Smoking doesn't harm you. Do a lot of people do that in life? Well, they do that in relationships. I know somebody, and they got married because they formed a relationship in academy at Ouachita Hills Academy, and they got married, and they're happily married today. I know several. But I'll tell you this, for every one that happened to, I can tell you a sad story of probably 10 or 15 that got together after graduation, were dating, eventually split up ugly, and don't talk to each other today, and their lives are hurting. The devil, I think, lets some people live to 100 so that he can entice others. Do you understand? Does that make sense? And somebody might say, like the parents say, I know that when I was in academy, I went to a self-supporting academy, and similar to this, it has similar rules. And I had some people that are in front of us. Wife and a husband, they were a couple years ahead of me. They met in academy, they got married. They went off to, they're godly people. They had 2 sons. Both sons came here. And one of those sons was the one I told you about because he's divorced now. What do you think his excuse about marrying from somebody you find in high school was? His parents. I wonder, I can't prove it, but I wonder if his parents' choices they are reaping today because it wasn't the counsel. Even though it worked out for them, they're reaping the results. Do you all follow? I wonder. I don't know. There's a lot of factors. You understand? But some of those things I wonder. I don't know how they play out. And beware of this. This is a trick of the devil to say, others did it. It's the right thing. You can do it too. All right, so be careful. Now listen. What does the Bible say? Proverbs 17. There is a way that seemeth what? Unto a teenager. But the end thereof is, there's a way that seemeth right. Those passions. This is she is so wonderful. I'll never find another one like this. And we've had students tell us this. We've had students tell us this. If I don't marry her, you're ruining my life by preventing me to have a relationship with her. That was just a few years ago. But it happens often. Now listen, young people. Some of those attending college do not. By the way, this is to college. Do you think it's more or less to academy? It should be more, right? This is to college students. It ought to be more to younger students. Those attending college do not properly improve the time. Full of the buoyancy of youth, they spurn the restraint that brought to bear upon them. Especially do they rebel against the rules that will not allow young gentlemen to pay their attention to young ladies. Is that true? In other words, the buoyancy of youth. Everybody, woo, you're excited, you're full of energy, life is gushing. None of you are thinking about this, what if I die today? None of you are thinking that. But when you get older in life and you're a grandma, you sometimes might be thinking about that. What have I done? So full of the buoyancy, and yet they respurn this. And then it goes on to say, the infatuation on the part of both young men and young women is thus placing their... Did I skip one? No. Okay, the infatuation on the part of young men and young women in thus placing their affections upon each other during the school days shows a lack of good judgment. Under this bewitching delusion, the momentous responsibilities felt by every sincere Christian is laid aside. Spirituality does what? Did you see that before? What happens when we go in the school environment, when we go down the line of attachments? The counsel is our spirituality dies, it wars against our soul. We're going to have no more effectual means of destroying us spiritually. And the judgment in eternity lose their awful significance. It is not time when marriage should be regarded in the light of felicity. That's happiness. And it is uncertain business, she says in her day. More misery than happiness is the result. And yet marrying and giving in marriage as it was in the days of Noah. There seems to be no restraint, but passion and impulse have controlling power, and you seem to be bewitched with love-sick sentimentalism. For this reason, rules and regulations are what? Highly essential. Highly essential. And to guard those connected with the sanitarium, the college, and offices of publication, and anyone who regards these restrictions as unnecessary has not spiritual discernment and will prove a hindrance rather than a help. Young people. It's so natural. Really, some people, you're spoiling my fun. God wants you to have fun. We do too. But when it comes at the expense of your spirituality, which this does, it would be worse than if we didn't have it at all. Prevent going on. All right, so this is that piece of paper. Did you pass that out yet? Do we have that paper? Can you pass them out? I just want to go over 10 steps for success. Young people, the devil, you can guarantee, is after you, and he is going to try all of his might to get you to be involved in some sort of romantic. Now, what do we call that on campus when there's this romantic stuff going on? Drama. We call it drama. Now, it doesn't have to be romantic. Drama can be girl, and guy, right? You get at odds with each other, you get at fight, but usually it is girl over a guy. Or at least somewhere in the mix, there's some of that. Or there's guy over a, that's never happened at Ouachita Hills, right? Two guys interested in the same girl. Never happened to two girls interested in the same guy. Actually, never happened to three girls interested in the same guy. I'm just saying, young people, sometimes the staff are like, students are like, oh, the staff, they're, we've been there. We were teenagers too. You know what James Dobson said? You know who James Dobson was? He's a psychologist focused on the family, famous Christian psychologist. he said, quote, "The parents' sole responsibility is to get their kids through the teenage years." In other words, it's so fruitful ground for dangerous problems because of this limbic system that's firing that if we can just get you past, then the frontal lobe comes online, then things settle down, and people look back at those teenagers' years. You know, we've had students do this. They get to the 17, 18 years, things are settled out, and they look back at the freshmen and they say, what is their problem? And I say to them, that was you 4 years ago. It was all of us. It's what we go through, right? It's what we go through. Now, there's 10 steps here for success when it comes to avoiding this pitfall and defeating the enemy. He's after you. 10 steps for success, all right? What do you think the first one is? Guard your what? Okay, that's the second one. It all starts with, remember your destiny. Your destiny is formed by your character, and your character by your habits by your actions, your actions repeated, that is. Your actions are determined by your choices, and your choices by your, what does it all start with? Well, the character is down there. That's your action, your thoughts, and your thoughts. Your will, yes, but right after the will, it's what you choose to think about, right? Guard your thoughts. Guard your thoughts. Listen, young people, if you said there, ladies, this is particularly a problem for ladies. It's called daydreaming. You can have a whole life planned out in an hour. Is that true? Guys can do it too, but it's particularly a problem with ladies. It's called daydreaming. And you can think about how nice they're, what they said, your thoughts are where it all starts. If the thoughts are guarded, it really will defeat everything else. Because remember that our actions follow our thoughts. If you think about something, eventually you'll do it. Sin begins in the thoughts. And if you think about it, it will eventually happen. So if you change what you think about, you'll change what you do. That's just paramount in our life. It's true. All right, the second point. You said it. What is it? You guard your what? What's the second thing you have to guard? Guard your, a look, a stare is a start. I don't know, there's something that happens when eyes lock. You look at somebody and you're just like, look into those eyes for a second. And then you look away. And you just got a dopamine hit that went like that. True or not? Especially when you've been thinking about it for hours, right? You look into those eyes and it just, boo! And then you have others around and boo! It gets this dopamine hit. And you're like, wow, that felt so good. I want to do it again. And you look into their eyes again. Young people, if you guard your thoughts and you guard your eyes, almost 100%, you will stop it right there. We all need to be blind. That's what we need, right? But I'll tell you, blind people have problems too. The devil is still after blind people. Because, gentlemen, ladies, what does the devil most effectively appeal to ladies through? Their eyes or their ears? Their ears. What they say to you, not what you see. My wife, when I got married, guys like to work out and they like big muscles. And I've asked ladies almost universally, do you all like big muscles? Almost universally, ladies say they don't like big muscles. In fact, they're kind of gross, they say. Not all, but almost. I mean, it's something about it. I've seen it true. They're not interested. Who buys the magazines on the shelf store, on the muscle magazines? Ladies or men? The men do. Ladies don't buy them. And which is bigger? Nowadays, is with the internet, but it used to be Playboy or Playgirl. Playgirl was magazines that had pornography of women and, of men, and Playboy was pornography of women. Which was the bigger sales? By far, Playboy was bigger. In other words, what is it, eyes or ears, that men are appealed to? It's eyes. They see skin. Doesn't matter whose skin it is. They just see skin, and that's a problem. Ladies, it matters. It doesn't, ladies don't get turned on through their eyes. And they don't even get turned on into ears unless it's a certain person. And because they have this relational attitude, and then suddenly that becomes very significant. When it's the right person, the right place in their mind anyway. And men, it doesn't matter. That's why pornography is largely a male phenomena, but it's not only. There are plenty of women that are involved in pornography. But you have to realize that it is through our eyes that the devil often approaches this side, and it's through the ears that it's on this side. So what do we have to do? We need to guard our eyes. Look away. Because where you look, Job says, he said, why would I look upon a maid? He said, I've made a covenant. Why would I look upon a maid? I made a covenant with my eyes. I think it says that I would not look upon a maid, a young lady. M-A-I-D. M-A-I-D, yeah, maid. I think that's the King James version of it. All right, that's an important one. It's a big one. All right, the next one. First one, proximity equals... Close. That's the word for proximity. Propinquity is the word for proximity. What does it equal? It starts with a P. Perdition. Proximity equals perdition. Close, close. Danger. Peril is danger. You stay clear. It's hard to get into trouble if you're apart. If you're in two different rooms and you never associate together, I guarantee you probably won't get in trouble. Right? Proximity equals peril. Just recognize that when you're together, it's more problematic than when you're apart. And that's one of the reasons why we have two sides of campus. And you can't be together in mixed groups without a staff because that's perilous. The devil's more active there because you'll get these what? And then you're all together and you're and then you're taking a risk and it's I couldn't hit the ceiling. And then all of you were like, we were laughing and nobody knew why we were laughing. Because what you're doing is getting a dopamine hit. Right? And that's wrong. God made us that way. Now listen, sometimes I want to ask God, why did you do this? I think there's one reason in particular that I know of why God did it. Young people are more eager to take a risk for God than old people are. You give a tract to a young person, and they give it to somebody, and they're like, wow, they got a little dopamine hit. An adult or the others, they might think I'm funny. They might look like I'm strange. Would you like a tract? And we're less risk. So I think God enabled young people to do more for God. In fact, we're told that young people can do more than the older people for God. And I think part of it is that God created us that way. But the devil hijacked it. Whenever there was a gift given by God, what did the devil do? Music has been corrupted. Sexuality has been corrupted. Homosexuality and all the other stuff has come in. The food has been corrupted. Marriage has been corrupted. So when God gave a gift, the devil corrupted it. And so he gave the teenagers this gift. The devil's corrupted it, but you can do more for God than can I, if you are true. And when some people see young people, and they're like, they're not associating together, they're clean, they're dressing nice, and it makes the older people go, wow. These people are different. They're not normal young people. And it takes, that world notices it. Right? All right, so next one. 4, pledge to avoid it rhymes with pledge. The edge. Avoid even the appearance of evil and always seek to do what is right, always. Listen, there is something called, sometimes, the staff might see something, and they come to the students, they say, we've been noticing something, that you've been seemingly spending a lot of time with this individual. You've been talking to somebody, we're usually the last to notice it. The other students of all sometimes, when are the staff going to do something, right? Sometimes, but we're wanting, assuming the best, wanting the best, and sometimes we're hoping you'll get it, you'll get the message and you'll take care of it yourself. We won't have to intervene. That's far better. Do you make the right decision for the right thing? But listen, avoid even the appearance. My wife, this is my wife, she was a student here, right? And there were, at the time, there was only two groups of people. There was no campus here. The school was at the Clark's house, and there was a trailer. And most of the students were kind of worldly. She was spiritually inclined. That's why she came here. But when she got here, she found out there was a bunch of other worldly-minded people. But there was another young man that was spiritually inclined. So who do you think she spent time with? The one that was spiritually inclined, the same way with you. So she started spending most of her time with this young man because she could talk about her devotions. None of the other kids wanted to talk about the devotions. And so she started talking about it. And her dean came to her one day and said, Miss Botany, I've been noticing that you've been spending time. And she had no feelings for this man. And you know what she was tempted to think? Oh, I can't believe it. They destroy all my ocean. You know, she was tempted. But she actually talked to the man and said, you know, I should avoid the appearance of evil. We don't have anything going on, but why don't we follow that counsel? They both did, and to their credit, he's a pastor today. She works at Ouachita Hills in lives of ministry. They didn't get married. They didn't go on that. They separated just because of the counsel and avoiding the appearance of evil when there was nothing there, right? So if somebody comes to you and says, listen, consider this. The Bible says that. Even if there's nothing going on, but almost universally, what do the students tell us? We're just friends. Universally. I don't think we have ever, well, occasionally we will have some people be silent. In other words, they won't say, we're just friends. They'll just go. But almost universally, they'll say, well, just friends. And then as soon as they graduate, they become a couple. Almost, I mean, it's happened more times than I wish to remember. Listen, avoid the edge. This is what, it'll make it successful this year when it comes to drama, because if you avoid the edge, you will not fall off of it, right? When tempted to say what? Yes. Say yes? When tempted, say yes. Is that right? No, there's this real power in this two-letter word. There is real power. What does the Bible say if you resist the devil? What will he do? He'll flee. Now, can you imagine, picture the devil fleeing from you. Does the devil go, oh? What does he do? He puts his tail between his legs when you resist, because a angel mighty in strength with a flaming sword just appeared, and he is out of there. He's fleeing. When you do what? When you resist. We have no power to cause him to flee, but the resist, listen, the resist, Kenny, is in what? I think you said it, or did you say it? What is the resist in? It's that word that everything begins with. Your thoughts, your destiny, your actions, your habits. What was the first thing? Your will. Because the resist is the will. It's the action of the will. Was that you that said it? Okay, Isaiah. So it's the will on the side. And when you do that, there is power. We can't make him flee, but the will enables Jesus to work. So don't walk away. Do what? Run. Right. Yeah. When Jesus, how did Joseph resist? He went naked. I'm serious. She grabbed his jacket, and he would rather flee without anything on than to stick around. And by the way, that was a huge temptation. He was a young person. He had those hormones. She was pretty. She was enticing. She had tried over and over and over and over and over again to get him. Now think about that. She's your master and all this. There's a lot of psychological pressure and social class and all this stuff. And he knew what the consequence was if he fled. And still he fled. He was out of there. And he suffered, did he not? He suffered unjustly. It wasn't his fault, but he suffered. But in the end, what happened? He imagine after he was promoted and was now, you think he could have just gone to Pharaoh's wife, you know? Not Pharaoh's wife, but Potiphar's wife. he's promoted. He's now the king, and he walks past, and there's Pharaoh. There's his wife, just waves at her. I mean, they know something that nobody else knows. That he was faithful, and now he's on top above her. You understand? He's powerful, and she's down here, right? I'm sure after this was all done, she never saw him. She never came around when he was there, I'm guessing, right? She knew he could have made things, he had the power now to make things right. You understand? He didn't do it because he was serving God. All right? If you are not sure, do what? If you don't know what the rules are and you're not sure, what do? No. Something more important than that. Yes. Ask, right? Oh, it is don't do it. You were right. Okay. If you're not sure, don't do it. But ask, right? Don't take unnecessary. Think before you act. Seek counsel. Ask and say, is this right or wrong? Right? If you come to us and say, listen, I'm really struggling. I've been thinking about that, and I just need some help, Mr. Dean. And we've had that, students that come to that. And it's so encouraging when they say, those thoughts will come. They'll come. The devil's after you. He'll bring them because the teenagers and all of society is pressuring you. Now is the time. You got to do it. And when you watch the movies, it's all about romance. You watch the Titanic and this nice historical movie. What is it all about? I haven't seen it, by the way, but I've heard about it. And I don't even want to ask how many have seen it because I'm afraid what answer I would get. And it was all nice and clean, wasn't it? No romance in it at all. Movies have romance, they have humor, and they have violence. And if you took those three away, nobody would want to watch them because they'd be so bland. Because when you watch it, it fires your dopamine receptors because of the mirror neurons, and you get this, just by watching them do it, you get a spike in the dopamine. And you come away, oh, that was such a good movie. It was all romance, right? And so the movies are saying, now's the time, and you need to think about Justin Bieber or whatever it is. What's his name? What's the name? Huh? I'm too late. Is that a long time ago? Who's the current one? You can tell I'm out of it, right? I don't try to keep up. Who would it be now? Michael Jordan? That's my age. By the way, I'm 2 inches taller than Michael Jordan. Not near as good, but athletic, that is. All right. Honesty is always the best policy. Honesty is always the best policy. Can the devil do anything can God do anything with dishonesty? Absolutely not. And by the way, when you came here, you pledged to follow the rules, did you not? So if you know the rules and you are not following them, what is that called? It's called dishonesty. I said I would, and I'm not doing it. I am being dishonest. And can God do anything with dishonesty? And that is the devil's territory. Deception and dishonesty is the devil's territory. So he will get you to do this because he knows that if you do, your spirituality will what? It'll die. That's what we read, isn't it? Can you see why it'll die? Can you see why it'll die? Because it's dishonest here. Does that make sense? It has to, because you're doing something that you said you wouldn't. God cannot bless deception in any form. It's absolute. What was Jacob? What was his name? What did it mean? It mean deceiver. Because he did what? Yeah. He deceived his father, and he got the birthright through a deception. He got the right thing the wrong way. Right? Some of you want to get married. Most of you want to get married. But the devil's going to try to get you to get the right thing the wrong way. The wrong time. The wrong place. Because he knew that if he does. When did Jacob become an overcomer? After he gave up on his dishonesty. And he asked God to forgive him and cleanse him. And he was known then as an overcomer. Just because you make mistakes doesn't mean that you're going to be labeled that for the rest of your life. When you come clean and you change and you decide to follow God, you'll get a new name. You get a new reputation. We've had students here that have been kicked out because of this stuff. 2 weeks, I think, years ago, back in the O's, I should say, 2 weeks before graduation. Not joking. Been here all year. And we've been trying to work with them. 2 weeks before graduation, they snuck out of the dorm. 2 people. All year long. And then they were sent home. Yeah, they were sent home. No, they weren't seniors. thankfully. We've had seniors the night after graduation. They graduated. That night, they snuck into the girls' dorm with somebody who wasn't a senior. They were still here on campus. So a junior that was going to be a senior the next year and a senior that had just graduated snuck out, and they snuck into the girls' dorm.
Did they go home?
They did.
Did they graduate?
No, the girl and the guy that were juniors did not. The senior was already graduated. What can we do? He's left, you know. But the two girls and the one guy left. Yeah, they went home. I tell you, young people, it agonizes because I'm just like, what could God have done in their lives? And the devil was after them, and the devil was successful in getting them kicked out, and I've traced their happening, like what had happened in their life, and they haven't had an easy life. Those that have gone through, and I'm still friends with them, and we see a couple of them now and then, we talk to them and so forth, but I think, what they could have been, at least in that area. God will restore, right? Anyway, I told you that when 2 weeks before graduation, they were kicked out. Well, the girl went, she was a sophomore, and she went to another school for a year, and she came back her senior year. Came back to Ouachita Hills her senior year. And pardon? Yeah, she came back the summer before her senior year, worked that summer, and then came. We re-accepted her. If she goes to another school and had a good experience, she had learned her lesson, and she wanted to come back. We accepted her back. And she has done really good. I mean, she's just, yeah. The other gentleman, unfortunately, was not quite the same story. But she came back. She came back. She chose to come back. So, you know, she doesn't have a label. In fact, she wasn't our RA, but she worked in the office. She had like an important job. In other words, just because you make a mistake doesn't mean you're going to be like, oh no, you're out of here. We're going to hold it forever. If you follow, if you change, you understand? Okay. All right. I'm going to skip this one. I'm almost out of, I'm way out of time. All right, so choices. Your choices affect others. Is it true that what you do will impact others at this school? Yes. Yeah, drama is just between you and the person alone. Absolutely. At a school like this, suddenly it becomes everybody. And some students are like, I don't know what's going on. Yeah, sometimes I'm not, well, it's a relief to me if there's somebody sometimes that doesn't know that, because I usually think, well, they're probably trying to do what is right. Because when people are doing what is right, nobody wants to talk to them that's doing what is wrong. Does that make sense? because if they do, they get judged. It's like, so if a person, but listen, drama. Last year we had one of the best years, because at least the last half of the year, I should say. I was remembering the first half of the year. I was like, wait a second, the first couple months was kind of rough, but then it was like, we had why was it so good last year? It was because we had very little drama. Very little drama. This year will almost hinge, its success or its failure, or will almost hinge entirely on how much drama we have here on campus. Because drama stresses everybody out, staff and students alike. And usually it's this uncurrent. In other words, something's going on, we're all talking about it, but nobody's talking about it openly. But when you sit in your dorm room or you sit at the table, you're talking, well, who said so? And then everybody's talking about it, but it's not talking about it openly. And so there's this undercurrent of disgruntlement and dissatisfaction. It almost always goes back to this area of human relations, right? Not just boy, girl, but mostly that often. No man is an island. We all affect others. Finally, notice this. Attitude determines your altitude. Attitude determines your altitude. In other words, cheerful cooperation will have its own reward. I told you about Christine and Nathan. That was my wife and that other man who decided to do it because it looked like the appearance of evil. And they both had a good experience. They had a good attitude about it. They weren't alarmed when somebody came. Sure, they said, we're just friends. And they were. By their own admission, they were just friends. But they chose to follow it because they wanted to avoid the appearance of evil. And others would judge them. The other students would be saying, Christine, you're spending a lot of time with Nathan. Other students would tell them that, suggesting what? You like him, yeah. Did you know? And some students would do this. They play Cupid. They say, did you know that so-and-so said such and such about you? And before that, they weren't thinking anything. And suddenly, like, what? He was thinking about me? Do you know who God's going to hold responsible? That friend is going to be judged as if they were guilty of the act themselves. And they may never have gotten a friendship, but they will be part of it if they are a part of it. And the wrong way. Okay, then what, number 10? says, honor God and he will honor you. Trust and obey. It works. It really works. He has promised you all the help you need to be successful. It really works. Trust and obey. It's not difficult. It's not hard, but we have to trust. I've told you about this. I wanted to go through some statistics, but I'm out of time. About marriage, do you know most marriages, about half of them that are formed in the United States end up eventually in divorce. But nobody at the marriage altar thinks they're one of those statistics. Do you all follow? Nobody thinks, I'm going to get married, and if it doesn't work out, I'll just get a divorce. What would you ladies do if your husband said, yeah, let's try this, and if it doesn't work, I'll get a divorce? Would you want to marry him? Too much money? What? Not unless he made a lot of money? Unfortunately, there is some of that, unfortunately. What about you, gentlemen? Would you like to marry somebody who says, yeah, we'll get married, and if it doesn't work, we'll get a divorce? Yes, that doesn't sit right, does it? But do you know what dating is? Dating is practice for divorce. I'm going to get close to this person. If it doesn't work out, oh, no, I'll get close to this person. I'll date this person. Oh, that didn't work out. I'll date this person for a while. Oh, that didn't work out. I date this person for a while. I get married to this person. It doesn't work out. I get married to this person. Do you understand? The way the world does it, where you just date around, you get close to people, is really practice for divorce. Does that make sense? God has a purpose. And his purpose is that you'll find the one, you'll be committed for life, and you'll be happy for life. But it only happens if you follow his plan. Now, just because it didn't work out, you may have gotten close to somebody and you really thought it was God's plan and purpose. Those things happen, right? But follow his plan and you'll be happier. There's a lot of statistics that we could show, research that shows the age. I talked about that. Why? Because our characters are undeveloped and you change a lot between the age of 20 and 24. You just need to wait. And the age of priests, we talked about that. Counsel. I want to read this and I'll end. She says this, I've spoken and read 5 mornings in succession in the school. So if Ellen White was here, she would be up here 5 mornings in a row and she's going to tell you the same thing over and over again. This was in Avondale, I believe. In school. And after talking with the whole school, I took the girls by themselves. So now Ellen White said, okay, now I've got a message for you all, right? And she talked with them seriously and charged them to keep themselves sacredly to themselves. We could not allow any courting or forming of attachments at the school, girls with young men and young men with young girls. She says to them. Then she goes on, she says, then this I said before the whole school. So then she got them all together after talking to the girls, and she talks to everybody, including I entreated them to be reserved, to be delicate and refined, and not to be forward and bold, inviting the attentions of young men. I told them that they should consider it an honor to cooperate with their teachers and seek to please them in everything. And I'll tell you, if I remember correctly, that's 1897. Do you remember where she was in 1897? She was at Avondale. And that was the year that at the end of it, she said every student was converted. It was 1894 or 95. It was those years. There were several years in a row where she said every student was converted. Why? Because they took that counsel to heart. And they had no drama. And they had the best school year spiritually. Why? Because this stuff is death to spirituality. You might think I'm having a spiritual life, but the devil's just deceiving you. And he'll give you that spiritual high, thinking, oh, I'm on steroids now in my spiritual life because I formed this relationship. It can't be wrong. And he gives you this spiritual high just so that he can chew you up, spit you out, and burn you in the end. Because it's death to spirituality according to you. You understand that? Let's pray. Father in heaven, this is, to me, it's a sobering topic. Why? Because the devil's going to hold us as staff, responsible. If things go on here and we allow it or permit it or see something and don't do it, and it's death to the spirituality of the students, it's like a sobering thing. But you have a plan. You want each one of these to be trained for a life of service, to find a partner that's going to enable them to become the most effective in that service, and to give them the joy and happiness on this planet and throughout their lives eternally. But the devil has no regard. He doesn't care or love us at all. And he will chew us up and spit us out. And then in the end laugh at our pain and misery. Only God loves us. And he gives us counsel because of that. Lord, help us to heed that counsel and follow it this year. That we might have another year free of drama, where we can focus on what you're calling us to do, become trained, to develop that relationship with Jesus, to be educated for a life of service, and to train to take the gospel to the world. I pray in Jesus' name.